1. Opening scene, Roots in Central Zimbabwe. Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa was born on September 15, 1942 in the rural village of Zimbabwe, in the heart of what was then southern Rhodesia. He was born to Mafidi Mnangagwa and Mother Murai Mnangagwa, members of a large, close-knit Karana family. Elders from the community often describe the Mnangagwa household as strict, hardworking, and united, a place where children learn discipline through farming, cattle herding, and respect for elders. 2. A childhood in a changing country. The Zimbabwe of Mnangagwa's childhood was a land under colonial rule, but also a land alive with communal strength. As neighbors from Zimbabwe have often said, young Emmerson was shaped by two worlds: the warmth and responsibility of rural life, the limits and inequalities of colonial society. People who grew up around him recall a boy who was quiet but observant, someone who watched more than he spoke. They say he carried an early seriousness, the boy who walked like he was thinking ahead. 3. Education, from village schools to mission training. Mnangagwa began his education in Zimbabwe at local primary schools before his family later relocated to Zambia, then northern Rhodesia. That move would become one of the defining turns of his early life. In Zambia he continued his schooling at Mambwa Boarding School, Kofui Trade School, where he trained in machinery and engineering skills. Teachers who knew him during those years described him as determined and practical, a student who excelled in hands-on work and showed leadership qualities even among older students. 4. The youth in Zambia, awakening of political consciousness. In Zambia, Mnangagwa grew up at a time when nationalist ideas were spreading across southern Africa. Many young Africans from Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi discussed freedom, independence, and identity. Friends and early political colleagues say this environment sharpened his awareness. A former classmate once said, "You cannot grow up in that era and ignore what was happening." Emmerson was one of those who couldn't look away. During this time, he met leaders and activists who encouraged young Zimbabweans to start organizing, learning, and preparing for the liberation of their homeland and the liberation struggle ****. From first operations to the end of the war. 1. Stepping into the struggle. When Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa returned from military and political training in the early 1960s, he stepped into a liberation struggle that was still young, fragile, and full of uncertainty. To many older comrades, he represented a new generation of fighters willing to take bold risks for freedom. Several veterans who trained with him recall his early attitude. He was always the one who volunteered. If a mission needed someone dependable, they called him. It was this reputation that drew him deeper into the strategic and security side of the movement. 2. Early underground work. Before full-scale guerrilla warfare began, the liberation struggle relied heavily on underground networks. Emmerson quickly became involved in building and protecting those networks. His early responsibilities included moving information and materials across borders, identifying safe routes for cadres, supporting early recruitment, coordinating with senior nationalist leaders. Those who worked around him described him as sharp and calm, someone who kept sensitive information secure. A ZANU member from that era once said, "Young as he was, he carried himself like a man twice his age. You could tell he was built for difficult work." 3. Arrest, trial, and defining strength. One of the most defining chapters of his liberation struggle story was his arrest by colonial authorities in the mid-1960s. Even in custody, he became known for his resilience and discipline. Comrades who served time with him often highlight this period as evidence of his toughness. Prison was meant to break us, but it shaped him even more. While in detention, Emmerson continued political study, deepened his understanding of strategy, and strengthened ties with liberation leaders. This helped prepare him for greater responsibilities after release. 4. Release and return to liberation activities. After his release from detention and deportation to Zambia, Mnangagwa did not step back. He stepped forward. This period saw him reconnect with ZANU leadership and return to operational duties. His responsibilities expanded into coordinating fighters moving between Zambia, Tanzania, and Mozambique, supporting logistics for the growing ZANU forces, assisting with training programs, acting as a bridge between political leadership and military structures. Those around him often describe him as disciplined, loyal, and highly organized. One regional commander recalled, "If you wanted something done properly, give it to roots in central Zimbabwe." 5. Path to activism, becoming one of the young cadres. In his late teens, Mnangagwa joined UNIP Youth Activities, United National Independence Party, in Zambia, gaining early political experience. But his heart remained tied to Zimbabwe. By the early 1960s, as nationalist movements took shape back home, he became connected to ZANU structures in Zambia. He was among the younger members who believed their generation had to step forward. Those who worked with him described him as disciplined, strategic, fearless, a young man with an unusual calmness, even under pressure. This reputation is mentioned often by early colleagues. 6. Training for liberation, military preparation. Mnangagwa was selected among the first group of young fighters sent for military training in Egypt and later in Tanzania. This was a major step, and many older comrades have spoken about why he was chosen. His ability to follow instructions, stay focused, and remain discreet made him stand out. During training, he studied guerrilla tactics, political education, intelligence and security work, survival skills, small arms handling. Trainers described him as disciplined, intelligent, and composed under stress. 7. A young man forged by circumstances. By the time he completed his training, Mnangagwa had moved from a quiet rural childhood to the hard reality of preparing for war. Those who knew him then often say his character was molded by the responsibility of being the eldest son, the hardships of colonial rule, the values of rural communal life, the intellectual and political environment in Zambia, rigorous military training. A veteran who served with him once said, "He was not loud. He was not boastful. But he had steel in him. You could trust him to finish what he started." 8. Transition to the war front. Returning from training, the young Mnangagwa joined early nationalist missions and operations. His work focused heavily on security, intelligence, and coordination for the liberation movement. This stage marked his official entrance into the long, complex journey that would eventually place him among the senior figures into leadership roles. As the liberation movement grew through the 1970s, Emmerson took on larger leadership responsibilities. He worked closely with senior figures, including future national leaders who recognized his reliability and strategic thinking. Much of his work remained behind the scenes, but it was crucial to securing intelligence, protecting leadership structures, maintaining communication lines, coordinating civilian and military units across regions. Veterans from that era regularly mentioned that he was trusted with sensitive tasks that required discretion, a strong work ethic, and unwavering dedication. 6. Work in Mozambique during the Liberation War. When ZANU established its headquarters in Mozambique, Emmerson became deeply involved in administrative, organizational, and security structures that kept the war effort stable. His contributions during this period included helping establish operational systems for ZANU, improving communication between command and field fighters, ensuring coordination between political and military wings, resolving logistical challenges that affected operations inside Zimbabwe. Senior comrades often say his strength was his ability to manage complex situations quietly and effectively. A veteran who worked in Mozambique said, "He was dependable, always present, always working. He had the patience to handle big responsibilities without seeking the spotlight." 7. The final years of the war. As the liberation struggle reached its final stages toward the late 1970s, Emmerson remained a key figure in the movement's administration and strategic coordination. He played roles in maintaining unity among cadres, strengthening the security of leadership, preparing structures for a future independent Zimbabwe, supporting diplomatic efforts surrounding the path to independence. Those around him described these years as some of his most intense, but also where his discipline and loyalty stood out most clearly. 8. Transition to independence. By the time of the 1979 to 1980 negotiations and the eventual birth of a new nation, Emmerson had become one of the most experienced young leaders within the movement. He emerged from the Liberation War known for discipline, loyalty, administrative skill, commitment to the cause, ability to work quietly and effectively, strong relationships with liberation leaders. This positioned him to step naturally into leadership roles in the new Zimbabwe that was about independence rise through government ***. 1980 onward. 1. A new nation, a new responsibility. When Zimbabwe achieved independence in April 1980, Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa stood among the experienced cadres ready to help build the new state. Years of underground work, military coordination, political study, and administrative leadership had prepared him for the heavy responsibilities that lay ahead. At independence, many within the liberation movement viewed him as one of the most disciplined and organized young leaders, someone who understood both the demands of security and the necessity of unity. A senior colleague from that era once said, "He had the habits of a man trained by hardship. He worked long hours, asked for no praise, and focused on what needed to be done." 2. First major role, Minister of State Security, 1980. Emmerson's first post-independence appointment was as Minister of State Security in 1980. This position placed him at the center of national stability during a time when Zimbabwe was merging liberation forces, rebuilding institutions, and ensuring peace. His responsibilities included helping unify former fighters, building modern national security systems, ensuring intelligence structures operated professionally, supporting the protection of the new government during a delicate transition. Colleagues describe him as methodical and firm, a leader who valued order and calm during a time of major change. 3. Moving into justice and legal affairs. In the mid-1980s, Mnangagwa was appointed Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. This role marked an important shift from security work to statecraft and legal governance. Under this portfolio, he contributed to strengthening Zimbabwe's legal institutions, improving legislative processes, modernizing laws to fit the needs of a young nation, ensuring that parliamentary procedures worked efficiently. Officials who worked with him during this period recall his sharp memory for detail and commitment to procedure. A former parliamentary clerk once said, "He understood the law, but more than that, he understood how institutions should run." 4. Parliamentary leadership, Speaker of Parliament, 2000 to 2005. One of the major turning points in Emmerson's post-independence career came in 2000 when he became Speaker of the House of Assembly. This role placed him at the heart of Zimbabwe's legislative system, presiding over debates, managing parliamentary affairs, and ensuring the smooth passage of laws. He gained a reputation for disciplined chairing of sessions, deep knowledge of parliamentary rules, fairness in maintaining order, steady leadership during a politically dynamic period. Several long-serving MPs describe his speakership as structured and firm, with one saying, "He kept the House focused." Whether people agreed with him or not, they knew he understood economic ministries. After his time as Speaker, Emmerson was appointed to portfolios connected with finance, economic development, and rural enterprises. His contributions included promoting investment initiatives, supporting agriculture and rural development, helping drive state-led economic programs, strengthening relations between government and key industries, overseeing industrial and mining portfolios during different periods. Civil servants from these ministries often describe him as results-driven, with a practical approach to solving problems. One director who worked under him stated, "He always asked, 'What can be done now?' He liked solutions, not excuses." 6. ZANU-PF leadership and strategic influence. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, Emmerson held senior positions within ZANU-PF. His influence grew as he took on roles including Secretary of Finance, Secretary for Administration, key member of the Politburo, senior negotiator in party matters. Inside the party, he was often described as a strategist, a unifier. A disciplined organizer. A man with strong institutional memory. Veterans of the movement frequently refer to him as someone who understood both the history and the future direction of the party. 7. Chief negotiator in the inclusive government talks, 2008. During the political talks that followed Zimbabwe's 2008 elections, Emmerson served as one of the chief negotiators for ZANU-PF. These negotiations led to the creation of the inclusive government in 2009. Diplomats and negotiators from different parties recall him as calm, patient, and focused on stability. His participation helped pave the way for a peaceful political settlement during a challenging chapter. 8. Return to state security and senior government roles, 2009 to 2014. After the inclusive government was formed, Emmerson returned to security and defense-related portfolios, including Minister of Defense, Senior Advisor on Security Coordination, Member of the National Security Council. During this period, he was involved in modernizing defense structures, supporting peacekeeping readiness, strengthening civil-military cooperation. Military officials who worked with him often describe his leadership as calm, steady, and experienced, shaped by decades of Vice President, 2014. A major milestone in Emmerson's rise came in December 2014 when he was appointed Vice President of Zimbabwe. This role placed him directly beneath the head of state and gave him oversight of economic reforms, justice and legal systems, national administration, senior government programs, coordination of major infrastructure initiatives. Colleagues from this era describe him as someone who worked long hours, preferred practical results, valued discipline and teamwork, remained rooted in his liberation background. One permanent secretary said, "He had the energy of a man who had carried responsibility his entire life." 10. The final step before the presidency. By the mid-2010s, Emmerson had served Zimbabwe for decades in multiple roles across government, parliament, defense, diplomacy, and party leadership. This long history positioned him as one of the most experienced administrators president and achievements during his presidency ***. 1. A turning point in 2017. By 2017, Zimbabwe was entering a period of political transition. Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, already a veteran of government and the liberation movement, became central to this new chapter. After changes within government and the ruling party, and following widespread national and regional discussions, Mnangagwa returned to Zimbabwe on November 22, 2017. On November 24, 2017, he was sworn in as the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe. Many observers at that time described his rise as the beginning of a new era, shaped by his long experience, calm demeanor, and deep institutional knowledge. A political historian once commented, "He had spent his life inside the machinery of state. Few people understood Zimbabwe's institutions the way he did." 2. The early message: reform, re-engagement, and economic renewal. Upon assuming the presidency, Mnangagwa emphasized three guiding themes: economic stabilization and modernization, re-engagement with the global community, opening Zimbabwe for investment. His inaugural message promised a shift toward economic growth, job creation, and restoring international partnerships. 3. Zimbabwe is open for business. One of Mnangagwa's earliest and most widely recognized initiatives was the Zimbabwe is Open for Business campaign. Under this drive, his administration focused on attracting foreign direct investment, improving the ease of doing business, supporting private sector growth, promoting mining, agriculture, and manufacturing revival, encouraging local and diaspora investors. Several international companies reopened interest in Zimbabwe's mining and energy sectors during this period. An economic analyst remarked, "The message was clear: Zimbabwe wanted to reconnect with global markets." 4. Currency and financial reforms. Zimbabwe faced long-standing financial challenges, and Mnangagwa's government introduced several major reforms aimed at stabilizing the economy. Key actions included introducing the Zimbabwe dollar, ZWL, after a multi-currency period, Establishing the Monetary Policy Committee. Strengthening oversight in the banking system. Supporting digital banking and mobile money expansion. Improving revenue collection through modernization of ZIMRA. Pushing for fiscal discipline and a reduction of government deficits. International financial institutions acknowledged early signs of strengthened fiscal balance during the initial years of development drive. A defining feature of Mnangagwa's presidency has been a strong focus on infrastructure development, often described by his administration as building Zimbabwe brick by brick. Major achievements include roads and transport. Expanded rehabilitation of major highways, including the Harare-Beit Bridge Highway. Upgrades to airport facilities such as the Robert Gabriel Mugabe International Airport expansion. Energy. Progress on major power projects. Rehabilitation of electricity generation systems. Dams and water projects. Construction and upgrading of dams such as Gweshangani, Causeway, and Marovanyati. Urban water system improvements. Digital infrastructure. Expansion of ICT access across rural areas. Support for broadband projects and modernization of telecom networks. Infrastructure experts often note that these initiatives reflect a long-term state-building focus. 6. Agriculture and food security. Mnangagwa's presidency placed significant emphasis on reviving Zimbabwe's agricultural sector. Key programs included Command Agriculture and later variations focusing on wheat, maize, and soybeans. Irrigation development across multiple provinces. Mechanization programs with modern equipment. Support for smallholder farmers. Expanding winter wheat production, leading to record harvests in some years. Strengthening livestock programs and disease control initiatives. Agriculture specialists have noted the comeback of local wheat production as a notable achievement. 7. Mining sector growth. Zimbabwe's mining industry became one of Mnangagwa's priority sectors for economic revival. Milestones include opening new platinum, lithium, gold, and chrome projects. Attracting investment into lithium mining, placing Zimbabwe among major global lithium players. Modernizing mining legislation to attract investors. Pushing towards the government's long-term target of a $12 billion mining economy. Industry leaders often point to mining as one of the fastest growing pillars under his leadership. 8. Re-engagement and diplomacy. Mnangagwa emphasized rebuilding diplomatic ties with the region and the international community. His administration pursued strengthened relations with SADC and the African Union. Re-engagement dialogues with the European Union and the United Kingdom. Increased cooperation with Asian partners such as China, India, and the UAE. Participation in global economic forums. Expanded partnerships in agriculture, energy, and infrastructure. Diplomatic analysts often describe this period as Zimbabwe's active return to global conversation, education, and healthcare. Several social sector initiatives marked Mnangagwa's presidency. Healthcare. Construction and rehabilitation of clinics and district hospitals. Modernization of central hospitals. Increased training programs for nurses and medical professionals. Expanded health outreach programs in rural communities. Education. Classroom expansion projects. Support for digital learning tools. Vocational training upgrades for youth skills programs. Civil service and public services. E-governance rollout aimed at improving service delivery. Modernization of passport and ID services. 10. Vision 2030 and long-term national planning. A central theme of Mnangagwa's presidency is Vision 2030, the national goal for Zimbabwe to become an upper-middle-income economy by 2030. This vision focuses on industrialization, infrastructure modernization, digital transformation, rural development, investment growth, youth empowerment, macroeconomic stability. Supporters of the initiative describe it as a roadmap for long-term prosperity. 11. 2023 re-election. In August 2023, Mnangagwa was re-elected as President of Zimbabwe. Following his re-election, he reiterated themes of unity, development, character and profile and legacy themes of Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa****. 1. A life shaped by hard terrain and high responsibility. To understand Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, many analysts begin at his childhood in rural Zimbabwe, where early responsibilities shaped a character built on survival, discipline, and duty. Growing up in a large family under colonial rule, and later moving to Zambia, he learned to adapt, observe, and endure. A former schoolmate once described him as the quiet one who watched everything. He had a seriousness beyond his age. This blend of observation and discipline followed him throughout his life. 2. Forged in the liberation struggle. Emmerson's formative years in the liberation struggle shaped central elements of his personality. Cautious decision-making. Loyalty to leadership structures. Persistence under pressure. Strategic thinking. An instinct for organization and order. Those who trained with him often say he developed a style focused on action rather than attention. A veteran put it simply. He preferred to work in the engine room, not on the stage. This reputation became a defining trait throughout his career. 3. The administrator, decades inside state institutions. Emmerson's long service across government ministries produced a leadership style marked by methodical planning, attention to procedure, firm direction, calm temperament, ability to manage complex portfolios. Colleagues from Parliament, the Justice Ministry, Defense, and later his vice presidency described him as someone who worked long hours, valued structure, and held deep knowledge of how state systems fit together. A senior public servant once remarked, he understood Zimbabwe like someone who had read every chapter of its book. 4. The strategist and negotiator. Throughout the post-independence era, Mnangagwa played roles that required diplomatic steadiness. Negotiations during political transitions. Party leadership roles. Economic and administrative reforms. Re-engagement with international partners. Security and defense restructuring. Negotiators from different periods describe him as patient, composed, and comfortable navigating high-stakes discussions. One diplomat noted, he was not emotional. He was calculated and steady. This made him a recurring figure during turning points in national affairs. 5. The president focused on state building. His presidency has emphasized themes that echo his character. Infrastructure expansion. Economic modernization. Global re-engagement. Agricultural revival. Mining sector growth. Long-term national planning through Vision 2030. Supporters of his leadership often highlight his state-building approach, which they describe as practical, long-term, and style, quiet, firm, and structured. Across decades, observers commonly point to several defining aspects of Mnangagwa's leadership. A. Quiet confidence. He often avoids dramatic speeches, opting instead for measured statements and direct instructions. B. Preference for order. He values structured processes, disciplined work, and stable management. C. Patience and long-view thinking. His decision-making often reflects long-term strategy rather than quick reactions. D. Strong work ethic. Accounts from colleagues repeatedly describe early mornings, late nights, and an orientation toward output. E. Loyalty to country and liberation ideals. His history in the liberation struggle and post-independence institutions continues to influence his sense of national duty. 7. Legacy themes. While the full legacy of any leader is shaped over decades and interpreted differently by historians, several themes consistently appear in discussions about Mnangagwa's life and work. 1. Longevity in service. Few leaders in Zimbabwean history have held as many senior roles across different branches of state. 2. Institutional memory. His decades of experience give him a rare understanding of Zimbabwe's political, legal, security, and economic systems. 3. Commitment to national stability. Supporters describe him as someone who prioritizes calm, order, and unity, especially during times of national uncertainty. 4. State building and infrastructure. His presidency emphasizes tangible development, roads, dams, energy projects, airports, agricultural revival, and mining expansion. 5. Economic reform and re-engagement. He has pursued investment, global partnerships, and modernization efforts designed to position Zimbabwe for long-term growth. 6. Liberation heritage. His legacy is tied deeply to Zimbabwe's journey from colonialism to independence, marking him as one of the last leaders whose life bridges both eras. 8. Leadership reputation among those who know him. People who have worked closely with Mnangagwa tend to describe him with phrases like disciplined, focused, strategic, patient, a listener who calculates before acting. A long-serving colleague summarized it this way: he carries 50 years of responsibility in his shoulders. You see it in how he walks, how he speaks, and how he works. 9. The story of a lifetime of service. Whether in the bush during the liberation struggle, in parliament chairing sessions, or in government steering national programs, Mnangagwa's life reflects a consistent pattern. A commitment to duty, discipline, and long-term national vision. His story is one of continuity, endurance, and the belief that a nation is built through steady progress over many years. Have come to define Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa's years in leadership. One stands out in bold color. The Zimbabwe scarf. A simple piece of cloth woven in the green, yellow, red, black, and white of the national flag, yet carrying layers of meaning. To many, the scarf became more than an accessory. It became a signature, a symbol of identity that he chose to wear every day after taking office in 2017. Some close to him say he wears it to remind himself of the country he serves, the one he walked with through war, independence, and decades of nation building. A reminder of duty, history, and the long road Zimbabwe has traveled. Others describe the scarf as a gentle message to citizens and the world. That national colors should not only appear on stadium days or public holidays, but in daily life, in ordinary places, in moments of work and decision-making. Supporters of the idea see it as a symbol of patriotism as personal identity, continuity with liberation values, unity across regions and backgrounds, a visual reminder of the promise of the flag. They say the scarf reflects a belief that leadership requires presence, not distance. That carrying the nation's colors on your shoulders is a way of saying, I remember where I come from, and I know who I represent. Some analysts interpret it as a branding choice, as a way for a leader to create a recognizable image in an era shaped by global media. In many countries, political figures are known by small, consistent symbols. For Mnangagwa, the scarf became that symbol. To others, the scarf represents identity that does not drift. A reminder that whether he is walking into a village meeting or an international summit, he carries Zimbabwe with him literally and symbolically. In the story of his public life, the scarf has become part of the visual memory of his leadership. A thread connecting past and present, personal and national history and responsibility. And for future generations, it may stand as one of the simplest ways they remember him. A leader who wrapped himself in the colors of the nation he served.